When I was young, I have an uncle who won the Lotto. We call it sweepstake in the Philippines. 1 million pesos. At that time, that was equivalent to 500,000 US dollars. And I checked today, that is equivalent to around $3 million. And that was a lot. But what I remember was the joy in their faces, jumping up and down, the siblings, the nephews, the nieces, everybody, they were just so happy. And even the neighbors were so happy. It was the big news in the village. And of course, they were able to pay any debts they had. My uncle was able to build a new house, the biggest house in the village. He was able to buy a car. And so he's the probably that was probably the second car in the village, and he was able to start a business. And from some of the winnings, he was able to give his siblings gifts. They were happy. But there's a sad news, a dark side of the story. Some were not happy with what they received. They began to compare what they received with the others. They said, that's not fair. Why is it that so and so received more than that we did? Why is that? That's not fair. And so they allow this griping, this complaining, become some sort of a cold bitterness such that it broke the relationship they had. They stopped talking to each other. It was so bad that, my uncle, and his siblings are dead now. That's a long time ago. But what happens is that it did not even solve that problem that they had, even until they died. It was sad. Sometimes we forget that equally important is not just the receiving of the gift, but how do we use the gift, or how do we handle the gift? Like in this case, they allowed that to cause bitterness and anger in the relationship. Now, Jesus Christ shared the same parable where there was a landlord who hired laborers to work for him in the first hour of the day and the second hour and so forth up to the last hour, where the landlord promised to give them 1 denarius each. And at the end of the day, he gave them the denarius, and those who worked earlier were not happy and they were complaining. Let me just read that in Matthew chapter 25, verse 11. It says, and when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. And they said, these who were hired last work only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us. Equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But the landlord answered, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do with what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? Rather than celebrate what the landlord gave them, they allowed it to mess up their hearts in gripe and bitterness. It's a lesson for us Christians, because God has also given us this gift of grace. All of us. Some of us probably have been there for decades. And then the response here, the lesson is that, do we celebrate it, or are we complaining and say, God, I work harder, I suffered more, and now there are others who you call just lately, and they don't deserve what you're giving, and they complain. I think it's a lesson for us where we ask the question, how do you respond to God's gift to you? Should we not just be happy? And should we also not be happy when we hear that God is giving others the same gift that He gave us? I hope so. Amen.